It's time for the ACU football team to cowboy up for a trip to Jerry World.
That's right. The third-ranked Wildcats take on number 4 North Alabama today at Cowboy Stadium. We'll preview the game right now on the Chris Thomsen Show.
Welcome to the Chris Thomsen Show. I'm Grant Boone along with ACU senior Austin Gwynn and the Wildcats head football coach Chris Thomsen. Worlds collide later this afternoon at the Death Star, otherwise known as the 80,000-seat behemoth that is Cowboy Stadium in Arlington. A pair of national powerhouse programs, ACU ranked number 3 in Division II from the Lone Star Conference, takes on 4th-ranked North Alabama, a 3-time national champ from the Gulf South Conference. It'll be the second game of a triple header being billed as the Lone Star Football Festival. Coach, your team over the last few years has played in a lot of big games. Where does this one rank in terms of the teams playing, the hype, all the extracurricular?
Well, this one ranks right up there. I mean, North Alabama is such a storied program, and you know, getting a chance to compete against them in the Gulf South at Central Arkansas, just knowing what kind of program they have, it'll be a huge game from that standpoint. But then the facility, you know, playing in Cowboy Stadium, our guys are extremely excited about that. And I think just overall, just the matchup and the atmosphere is going to be a great day for our program.
And Coach, you have a few guys left over from the team that went to the Cotton Bowl to see Commerce back in 2009. Are your guys nervous at all about the venue and how big of a stage it is that they're playing on Saturday? I
don't really think they're nervous. They're just excited. I mean, they've talked about it. I think we scheduled this about a year ago, and they've talked about it ever since. And so many of our guys are from the Dallas area and grew up Dallas Cowboys fans. I mean, Derek Odelusi is just beside himself, you know, to get to play in Cowboy Stadium and get out there on that star. And you know, told him, you have to focus on the game and not the star and all the, you know, the Cowboy end zone lettering, and just focus on the game. But I think they will.
We won't tell anyone that Ryan Smith, your defensive end, the junior from Fort Worth, is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Don't mention that. When we come back, we'll talk about this big trip later this afternoon to Cowboy Stadium. You're watching the Chris Thomsen Show. Back here on the Chris Thomsen Show on a day that will see the ACU Wildcats take on North Alabama at Cowboy Stadium. Kickoff is at 4 p.m., so if you're watching here live in the Abilene area, you still have time to drive over that 2.5 hours to Arlington for what should be a great day of football. Coach, we're going to talk specifically about the challenges that the North Alabama team presents. But first, let's talk about your team. It seems like, in a way, that this is almost like a second season opener. It's been 16 days since your team has played. Give us an update on what's happened in the last couple of weeks.
Well, the open week, we just focused on conditioning and improving our strength level, and then just fundamental parts of the game, and then really working our 2-minute situation. Everybody hurries the game up now, and you know, North Alabama getting that hurry-up mode, so putting a lot of pressure on our defense there, and working red zone and tight red, you know, in the open week, and then you know, this past week just getting ready for North Alabama, looking at their looks and the different schematic challenges that they present, which are great, and so I think we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks, and we'll see how we fare today.
And Coach, there's the ongoing debate about whether a bye week hurts a team or helps a team, but 16 days is longer than even a normal bye week would have. At what point does it hurt you guys to be outside of a game of football for more than 2 weeks, or does it really help you guys after a game that saw you make some mental mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I would have preferred to have played last week, but there's some advantages to being off on that Saturday, just getting some guys healed up. Any game is going to bring some slight injuries at least, and getting some guys healed up. North Alabama had to play last week, so they may have a few guys banged up. But I think there's pluses and minuses to both playing and not playing, and it's just the way the schedule fell this year. You have to go ahead and play it.
Let's talk a little bit about this Lone Star Football Festival, Coach. Cowboy Stadium beginning at noon with Midwestern State against Texas A&M Commerce. The nightcap is going to be, well, should be a terrific game. West Texas A&M against Texas A&M Kingsville. They went down to the wire last year down in South Texas. This is not the kind of spectacle that you typically see in Division II football. You've been around Division II in a couple of different conferences. This is unique, isn't it?
It is. I've first of all never seen a triple header. I've never been a part of that. You know, they do it in Texas high school now, but the Lone Star Conference, I can't recall us ever doing that, or even in the Gulf South, we never did that. And it's just it's for one thing, it's a costly deal to produce for our conference, and I think you know, I talked to Stan Wagnon earlier in the week, the commissioner of the conference. He said he felt like from a ticket sales standpoint, we were going to definitely cover our cost and then hopefully make some money there. He felt like the ticket sales were good, and I just think it's a great thing for the conference, especially in Dallas-Fort Worth. So much exposure to high school coaches and just different people there that may not know a lot about the Lone Star Conference because we're not on ESPN all the time. And different, you know, we get on Fox some and things like that, but there's not a lot of exposure. So putting it up in Dallas in that facility, I think is really good for the conference.
And 2 years ago, we already talked about it, you took your team to the Cotton Bowl, the Cowboys' first home field. What do you remember about that day, that game, the hype that surrounded it?
Well, just growing up and watching, you know, Texas OU for many years, and just some of the great Cotton Bowl games. I mean, as you walk out, those are the things that go through your mind playing there in the Cotton Bowl, and just some of the legendary players that played there. You know, but then the first thing sticks out in my mind is Drew Cuffey. I mean, just making an unbelievable play and pulling that game out. We were struggling as a team at that point in the season in some ways, offensively especially, and that seemed to kind of get us going and you know, propel us to a pretty good season that year. What a great day.
Another thought about the place they call Jerry World, Cowboy Stadium in Arlington. You and I have been to a game there before. We got to see the Cowboys play the Jaguars last year. Just maybe a thought about your first moment to step into that arena.
Well, I really hadn't even thought about that, but I know, you know, we've had the walkthrough on Friday and get to see some things. I mean, I'm excited about the opportunity to go in there and you know, after watching Danielle and Johnny in there last year, and just you know, that's a whole different atmosphere in there. That's like being in a disco. You know, the people in Pittsburgh and Baltimore would laugh at that because that's not the way they perceive football. But you know, I'm excited about that. I think our players are really pumped about getting in there, and I'm ready. I want to walk in there and see what that's like.
It's an amazing place, a gigantic screen that hangs over the stadium.
Absolutely, and with that screen, I mean, are you worried at all about your players staying focused during the game? I know if I were playing on the sidelines, I'd be looking up at that screen constantly.
Yeah, you constantly worry about distractions, whether it's, you know, something going on in the stands or something like that. I remember watching the Bears game and that first kickoff, Johnny's standing there and there's, you know, 15 cheerleaders on the deck behind him. You know, I
wasn't watching.
How do you focus in that type of environment? And you know, that'll be a challenge. Everywhere you go, there's unique challenges that are presented, but I'm not sure we've had this type of challenge yet.
It's going to be a great day. We'll talk a little bit more about the specific challenges that North Alabama poses as a football team. We've got more Chris Thomsen Show coming up next.
Welcome back to the Chris Thomsen Show. And right now we're going to do a little segment we like to call Cover 2. Myself and Grant Boone will talk a few ACU topics we didn't quite get to with Coach Thomsen. And first off, let's talk about the atmosphere and the hype of this game coming up against North Alabama. We got Coach T's take on it, but do you think that this atmosphere is going to get to the players at all? I mean, coming off a 16-day break, a huge game in a huge stadium, there's got to be some nerves.
Could be. Very well could be. I mean, when you first go to that facility, and I've had the great pleasure of going several times to Cowboy games there, it's hard to describe how mammoth the place is. I mean, you just walk in, and the first thing you see is the screen. I mean, the screen is ginormous. It goes from, like 20 to 20. And they're constantly showing highlights and commercials and other promos up there. So this isn't like any other place that these guys have ever played. I'm thinking of players like Janoris Jenkins for North Alabama. Here's a guy who played at the Swamp in Florida.
Right.
He's played at Neyland Stadium at Tennessee, 110,000 people. But this place is even different for some of those guys. And there are college football games, a couple of them there every year, but it'll be different. It'll be a challenge, I think, for both teams and both coaches to keep their players focused There is that Hoosiers mentality from the famous scene from that epic basketball movie where Gene Hackman, the coach Norman Dale, says, you know, when they go into Butler Fieldhouse, these little kids from Hickory, they're wide-eyed, and he says, you know, give me that measuring tape, and they measure the rim to the floor, and it's still 10 feet, just like back at Hickory, and still 15 feet from the free throw line to the, you know, to the goal, you know, just as it was in Hickory. So it's still 100 yards from end zone to end zone, and that's what the coaches will have to get their players to focus on. And I think once the kickoff finally happens, you know, I think the players, for the most part, will be able to focus in. But it is going to be a challenge unlike anything they've ever faced.
And I went to a Cowboys game last year, and I always found myself watching the game on the big screen. I had to keep telling myself there's actually a game going on.
Yeah, you're
on the
reaching
field.
for the remote. You know, how can I change it? Which the Cowboy fans wanted to do a lot last year.
That's right. That's right. Rough end of their season. Let's talk more about the game. The Wildcat D had a little bit of a tough time containing the Tarleton passing attack a couple of weeks back, and the Lions have a potent passing attack as well. Do you think they'll have any trouble containing that passing attack?
I think it's always hard to stop a spread when you have a quarterback who knows what he's doing running it. I mean, look at Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech, for the last 6-8 years, it hasn't really, by and large, hasn't really been shut down. Now you can slow them down some, but it's hard to really completely throttle a spread offense. And I was talking to the North Alabama play-by-play guy, J.D. Byers, earlier this week, and he was saying that last year they had kind of a modified spread, and now the first 2 games this year, it is just wide open. 4 wide receivers on virtually every play. So they have a senior quarterback, a guy named Lee Chappell, threw for 3,000 yards last year, and he's a guy who's a D1 caliber player, played at Georgia Southern. Nick Stevens of Tarleton State played at University of Tennessee, and he ran that spread for Tarleton State a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be hard to shut it down. The one thing that did impress me about ACU in the win over Tarleton State is when they had to make a play, they did. Did they give up some yards? Yeah. But they gave up 330 yards or so, to a guy who threw it almost 50 times. So big picture, it's not quite as bad as maybe as it might have looked.
And rumor has it there's going to be more than a few NFL teams there scouting some players on both sidelines. Does that make you nervous at all as a player to have a bunch of NFL teams there watching you and knowing that we've got Johnny Knox, we've got Bernard Scott, now Clyde Gates, Danielle Manning in the NFL?
Yeah, I think by now the ACU players have grown accustomed to having NFL scouts at practices, coming by to take a look, and at games. It's just been something that's happened the last several years, and we've seen, as you mentioned, those 4 guys and a couple of others, Raymond Radway and Travis Turner, get on to NFL rosters one way or the other, either a practice squad or, in Raymond's case, the injured reserve list for the Cowboys. And for a game like this, which features Janoris Jenkins of North Alabama, whom Todd McShay of ESPN ranks as the best cornerback in all of college football.
That's Division I, Division II, Division
III? Yeah, not just Division II, the best in all of college football. By now, these guys are used to having the NFL scouts there and watching. And when you consider the fact that you've got 6 teams playing 3 games that day, there'll be a lot of guys from the NFL represented.
Let's hope the ACU Wildcats show up and show their school well. When we come back on the Chris Thomsen Show, we're going to talk to Coach a little bit more about that North Alabama matchup. But first, here's Taylor Langston and Kristen Goodspeed with the JMC Network Sportscast.
Thanks, Austin. The women's volleyball team had a disappointing weekend at the Angelo State Invitational last weekend, dropping to a 5-4 record. The Wildcats were narrowly defeated by Texas Permian Basin, falling in the 5th game. Jenny Hutt was named to the ASU Invitational All-Tournament team and led the team offensively with 11 kills. Setter Kaylee Johnson contributed with 28 assists, and Sarah Oxford was big on the net, competing with the Falcons until they pulled ahead for a 15-6 win in the final game. The women hosted the Cardinals of Incarnate Word on Tuesday, so Kristen, let's see some highlights from that game opener.
Victory was found in the 5th game during a thrilling win over Incarnate Word on Tuesday night.
The women got a much-needed win in their first home game after a frustrating tournament last weekend.
And winning like that, winning games like that is all about character. So I was just trying to push character. It's been a struggle at times to adjust to a new system, you know, so there's some things that we're still learning and growing and figuring out how to communicate and have some chemistry with each other. But they add so much to us. Tonight we got to see a lot from two of our freshmen, Sarah Oxford and Haley Rhodes.
The Wildcats got up to a quick 2-0 lead before Incarnate Word fought back to tie the game to 2-2. In an exciting fifth-set win, Jenny Hutt led offensively with an outstanding 32 kills, and Haley Rhodes chimed in with 16 assists, while senior libero Kelsey Edwards contributed with 28 digs.
It's a position that I want, and I feel called to be in, but it's being vocal all the time and being calm in the pressure situation.
Well, Taylor, speaking of Incarnate Word, the Wildcats soccer team defeated Truman State last Sunday on Incarnate's campus. The Wildcats continued their winning streak, scoring 4-2 against the Bulldogs. Now their record is 4-0. Ashley Holton, Madison Brown, Andrea Carpenter, and Lindsay Womack scored the 4 goals of the game. On the defensive side, goalie Elliott London was credited with 2 stops. The Wildcats returned to action Friday, hosting their game against Incarnate Word. The team plays at home again this Sunday against Angelo State.
Last weekend, the men's tennis team brought home a spectacular win at the University of New Mexico with the help of sophomore Hans Hawk, who won the first singles title of the fall season. Hawk also teamed up with Nick Plum to defeat the Division I Arizona State in doubles. The Wildcats competed on the court to defeat players from Division I teams New Mexico State and Northern Arizona. The boys have prepared this week to head up against Texas A&M Corpus Christi in the Invitational taking place in Midland on Saturday.
For the JNC Network, I'm Kristen Goodspeed.
And I'm Taylor Langston. See you next week.
Back on the Chris Thompson Show, let's take a closer look around the Lone Star Conference, which has at the top of the standings ACU and Incarnate Word both at 1-0. You have a couple of teams 2-0, both of which have won games out of the conference, Angelo State and Texas A&M Kingsville. And Coach, let's talk about those Rams under first-year head coach Will Wagner. 35-12 winner over Western State in Colorado in Week 1, and then another road win up at Shadron State, a game that it appeared they had no business winning. 49-42 was the final.
Yeah, they were down 21 in the fourth quarter. We got to watch the game on the internet there and just got their passing game going. Their quarterback looked to really come alive, and if they get that going with their run game, they'll be tough.
Another win in the season opener for Bill Maskell and Midwestern State, 41-0 over Missouri S&T. Looking at the schedule for this week, in addition to the triple header with the Lone Star Football Fest, which has Texas A&M Commerce against Midwestern State, and then your game against North Alabama, and then WT against Kingsville in the nightcap, you also have Incarnate Word at Lamar. I'll take the Cardinals in that one. And then you have also Tarleton State on the road against another Division I opponent in Texas State.
Yeah, Tarleton State, had started off with 2 tough losses, and I expect them to give Texas State a real tough time. Texas State's played 2 1As to start the season, so that ought to be a good game.
Yeah, a couple of one-score losses for Kerry Fowler in Tarleton State, the 3-point loss to you, and then a 7-point loss against West Alabama last week. Okay, let's turn our attention to your game today against North Alabama, Coach. You told me earlier this week that the Lions may be the most physically gifted, physically talented team that ACU has ever played, at least since you've been here. And let's start with the Lions offense, which, as it seems they all do these days, works out of that spread. What do they have in terms of personnel, and what will your defense have to do to stop them?
Well, they've got their passing numbers are big. They've got a couple of receivers that are real threats, but they also can run the ball. The kid number 4, the running back for them, is a real explosive player, a little bit better than what we faced in Week 1, and those guys were pretty good. And they got a huge offensive line, and their quarterback has done a good job. He transferred from Georgia Southern and played in that particular offense, so he's got a good feel for what he's doing. And when those guys protect him and give him some time, and he's tough. He threw for a lot of yards last week.
Yeah, he threw for 3,000 yards, in fact, last year.
And, Coach, let's turn our attention to the other side of the ball. And the Lions have a player that we're probably going to hear his name a lot, not only this year, but probably in the NFL in years to come. Janoris Jenkins, freshman All-American at the University of Florida in 2008, a part of their national championship team in 2008. He's currently heralded as not only the top cornerback prospect in Division II, but in the entire nation. With a little bit of a green receiving core that you have, that matchup has to worry you a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Janoris and not only him, but they've got some other guys in that secondary. They have another Florida transfer at safety, and he's just an explosive player. They don't play him man every snap. They do a good job of mixing their coverages, but when they need to play him man-to-man coverage, he's great at locking whoever they assign to him down. But he's also a huge factor in the kicking game. He took a punt, 88 yards last week against Glenville State. So, you know, not only does he worry in the back end, but the special teams are a huge factor with him.
Yeah, Jenkins was last week's Gulf South Conference Special Teams Player of the Week. Coach, for those who follow ACU football, but maybe not other conferences around the country, they may not realize North Alabama's place on the Division II landscape. You've seen it in a couple of different occasions as a coach for Central Arkansas when you played them, and then also when you took Bernard Scott down to the Harlan Hill ceremonies. That's where the Harlan Hill Trophy is presented each year as part of that week where Raleigh Stadium, their home stadium, hosts the Division II National Championship game. Maybe just a thought about where North Alabama sits in that Division II landscape.
Well, and even before that, when I first started coaching here at ACU, A&M Kingsville was quarterfinals one year, semifinals, and also in the finals, I think, in '94, and almost, I think, all those years they played North Alabama. So I remember watching them on ESPN in the finals a couple of times, and then Coach Collins actually was playing at Central Arkansas as a player during those years when North Alabama was winning national titles. So even back to then, I mean, I've always known who North Alabama is, and they're prominent, like you said, on the Division II landscape. And then going down there and seeing their campus, it's a beautiful campus. It's set on the Tennessee River, and it's just, I mean, it's a beautiful place, a university setting, and they have a great program. So they've done a great job with that program, despite, you know, whoever the coaches are. Coach Hudspeth did a great job before Coach Bowden, and he's carrying that on. So it's a great program.
And Coach, you just mentioned him. It's not often you see a guy across the sidelines that's got quite the track record that Coach Bowden does at North Alabama. But before he was even there as a head coach at Auburn, he had a perfect season in his first season. His dad, obviously, Bobby Bowden, coaching legend at Florida State. Your thoughts on him?
Well, I've always had a little bit of insight on Coach Bowden. Coach Conk, the guy that I worked for at Central Arkansas, actually worked for Coach Bowden there at Samford University even before he went to Auburn. So, you know, a lot of influence there in Coach Conk's coaching style and his philosophy. And we had always heard about Coach Bowden and some of those things, and just that whole family coaching tree. So I've got some familiarity with those guys and have a great deal of respect for them.
Well, Coach, it's on today, 4 o'clock against North Alabama at Cowboy Stadium. It seems like we've been waiting forever for the season to resume after that big season opening win. Play well today with your troops there at Cowboy Stadium. A reminder, if you're watching this program live here in Abilene, still time to get over to Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, just a 2.5-hour drive. Tickets can be purchased at the stadium for $25. Yeah, get you into all three games, the Midwestern Commerce game at the beginning, and then the nightcap, WT and Kingsville, as well as the ACU game against North Alabama. We'll have highlights next week and a preview of, at last, our home opener next Saturday against Angelo State. For Austin Gwynn and the coach, Chris Thomsen, I'm Grant Boone. We'll see you next week on The Chris Thomsen Show.